Andy Johnson, we are looking at racism and implicit bias today. Now, our brain creates our own reality. We create our own reality with our brain. What does this mean? We use our unique, interconnected series of neural networks to perceive and interpret reality. And since we each have greatly differing neural networks, we're wired differently, we each perceive and interpret reality differently. Now, whether we are conscious of it or not, our perceptions are based, what we see is based on our past experiences and our neural networks, because our neural networks are created based on our past experiences. What does this have to do with race? You will see it in a minute. We may not see race or racism, but our brains do. Our brain does, as well as our policies and procedures and laws and guidelines and other things. All right. Now, what is a culture? That's important because we'll be looking at police culture in just a minute and why it is people of color often are treated differently. Cultural set of attitudes, beliefs, worldviews, values, and behaviors of a particular group or organization. It defines their general behavior, their worldview, their way of life, who they are and how they should behave. It's the acquired learning of the group. People in that group are shaped by their peers, their experiences, and their environment, just like we all are. Now, a police culture, it can be problematic if, and a culture grows, a set of world views grows, if it sees itself as an occupying army, and us versus them, that othering. If people within that culture look at people of color in a negative way, whether consciously or unconsciously, implicit, you're not aware of it, and explicit bias and racism affects how people within that culture perceive others. And police officers often have to make split-second, highly emotional decisions. So their neural networks, what's up there, affects these highly emotional split-second decisions. That's why making jokes, oh, I was just joking, racial homophobic jokes, jokes about women, all of these types of cultures create a culture. It shapes the neural networks of people within those cultures in subtle ways. It all creates to this culture of racism and other types of discrimination. Now, the brain is a pattern detector. Our brain has evolved to notice patterns. We are hardwired to make sense of the world. This has enabled our species to survive. We naturally try to create order out of the chaos that we see. Learning is making sense of things, is creating order out of chaos. It's connecting the new to the known and organizing things. Now, to understand anything, you must see how things are related to each other. You must see the patterns and the commonalities. That's what our brain naturally does. This perceptual organization, it's a natural thing that the brain does. The brain perceives things based on limited data, and again, necessary for survival, and it fills in the blanks. It organizes data into entities or categories when all the data are not present. For example, you're walking through the woods, you hear a growl, you see a dark shape moving through the woods. You don't need all the data to know, oh, there's a bear, I better run. All right? You are filling in the blanks based on partial data. Gestalt is another term for how your brain completes the pattern or the configuration based on only partial blanks. We fill in the blanks. We do this all the time to operate more efficiently in the world. We use our neural networks to make sense and to fill in the blanks. It is more efficient and effective to do so. Stereotyping is grouping people based on incomplete information. We all do this. We all create stereotypes. It's a shortcut. So our brain operates more efficiently. So we don't have to relearn in each and every situation. But being aware of these stereotypes helps us to get beyond these. Nobody likes to be a category or a stereotype. Now, confirmation bias, I only look at the facts, you say, is a tendency to look for, interpret, perceive information that's consistent with what you believe. Your belief determines reality. You believe such and such, you believe a certain category of people are such, have certain characteristics. You see that, and it confirms your bias, your stereotype. That's called confirmation bias. You perceive only that which confirms what you believe in the first place. Prejudice is belief that a certain group of people share common characteristics. It could be hostility or negative thinking towards a person or group based on their membership, and that is the problem. And we all have these. It's important to recognize our own prejudices. This hostility or negative thinking, we may not be aware of it. It's called microaggression, or micro assaults, or micro insults, or micro invalidation. These are behaviors or words that demean or insult or send denigrating message. We're not aware of it, but it can create a toxic culture in which to work. Now, the neurocognitive perspective, the implicit association test. And again, I don't see race, I don't see racism. You may not, but your brain does. This is a measure of bias below consciousness. Implicit, we are not aware, an unconscious bias. It measures how closely things are stored in our brain, not actual brain, but neural networks or cognitive files or schema. All right, encoded within our files, how closely things are associated with each other. Now, in this test, and there's different types of them, but on the one related to race, the subject is shown a picture of a white face and a black face and asked to associate good words or negative words, all right, such as happy, smile, fantastic. Those are positive words. Negative words, ugly, nasty, failure. They're asked to associate words with each, and it times your response. Things that are more closely stored together in our brain, we're able to respond quicker, microseconds. And it does this with all areas, religion, ability, other such things, and it times your response. And it reveals biases, implicit and unconscious. And do a Google search, IAT, implicit association test. You can take this. Very interesting, very interesting. So that was a neurocognitive perspective. From a strictly neurological perspective, implicit bias and racism. Functional magnetic resonance imaging measures the change of blood flow to particular parts of the brain during specific tasks. Cerebral blood flow and neurological activities are coupled. All right, and there are other sorts of devices that are able to observe the brain online as it is doing something. And here's the brain as the person is taking a test of some sort, a bias test. Now, the amygdala is the part of the brain that's activated in response to fear. If someone walks up behind you and goes, boo, and you get that, that's the amygdala kicking in. All right, that's key for emotional and social processing. It's critical for fear learning and associative learning. And if you have an anxiety disorder, this is the part of the brain that is often a little out of whack. You feel like someone is saying boo to you all the time. Now, it's necessary for our survival. The dual processing theory of stimuli, again, necessary for survival, it says that subcortical regions of the brain are activated more quickly. When we see a stimuli, oh, there's a shape. It looks like a snake, all right? The high road processing, boop, it goes to the amygdala and your body reacts, all right? The other route is the prefrontal cortex. This is slower processing. You are able to think about it, explicit and thoughtful. In response to fearful stimuli, you're not able to think quickly because this automatic processing, the subcortical processing occurs in these more subcortical parts of the brain, the amygdala, the danger, fear. You react quickly and your body responds. You get the increased heart rate and the muscle tension, that sort of thing. That's necessary for survival. If you're walking through the woods and you saw a snake shape, if your body didn't react automatically, if you had to stop and think all the time, well, you'd probably step on the snake. That's why our brains have evolved to activate our bodies quickly without thinking. That's called high road, all right, versus low road processing. Now, they have done these tests measuring blood flows, all right, and they show both white people and black people different faces, and they found that with people of color, both with white and black, there tends to be a greater reaction in the amygdala, all right, greater response time. As well, they measured in-group versus out-group faces. White people were showed both white and black people were showed both white and black. And of course, there's a greater amygdala reaction to out-group faces. It's an evolutionary response. We have evolved to associate others outside our tribe with more wary, all right? We tend to respond to people who are not like us. That's our brain. And again, we may not see race, but our brain does. That's an important thing. So what do we do with this? Well, and again, you don't see race, but your brain does. Implicit bias, implicit racism is much harder to change versus explicit. So this idea that I am colorblind or school is colorblind or policy is colorblind, we need to get beyond that. We need to talk about race and racism. Implicit bias can decrease with actual friendships and acquaintances without group races. Implicit biases only decrease when people develop friendships and acquaintances without group races. Implicit bias decreases with these things. Segregation increases implicit biases of outgroups of both teachers and students. You need that emotional experience necessary to change racial stereotypes and implicit biases. That's why relationships are so important. The integrated environment, you create positive experiences with the outgroup.